Good afternoon, everyone. It is just 1 minute past the hour, so we're going to give it a couple more minutes before we get started. Jason Barnes here with Jessica Pancoast, and we're going to talk today about tracking CPT codes and making sure that you guys are getting paid per visit where you're looking to get paid, and so this is a big portion of that, but we've got a bunch of people on the web portion we know haven't logged into the audio portion, so we're going to give this another minute or two. Thanks for your patience, and we'll get started here in a moment. In the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat.
If you guys do not see the chat, it should be over on your left-hand side. There is a button up at the top that will say Show Chat if you don't see it, and you can turn it on.
All right, perfect. We'll be back in another minute or two, and we'll get started. All right, we're going to get started. A whole bunch more people joined, so I'll go ahead and introduce myself, Jason Barnes, Chief Operations Officer here, and I'm the head of our help desk and training teams sitting right next to me, Jessica Pancoast. I must point out, Jessica is much tanner than she was a couple of weeks ago due to some well-deserved vacation, and the smile on her face, I think, is going to be heard by all who are listening today. I know I'm certainly enjoying spending time with her. But today we're actually talking about a pretty specific topic. And want to define the problem that we're looking to solve for a couple of our practices here. Collections, productivity. When it comes to certain doctors or whether or not certain payers are reimbursing, today we actually want to start talking about procedure codes, CPT codes, and how we track their reimbursement. So we've got a couple of tools we want to talk about, and we're going to first head over to our demonstration account here. And when you're looking at collections from a regular basis, there's a lots of different ways of doing it. We always tell people the radar chart and configuring that is one of your best ways of going about it. So you can see what your total billed is and your total collected. But what makes that up? And when something's lower than what you had expected, there's a number of ways to dig in, and sometimes, not all the time, poor CPT code reimbursement can be the difference. Whether or not you offer physical therapy in your office, and there's a sequestration law that you just weren't aware of that is reducing CPT codes. You're in network and you're getting underpaid. You're in a situation where a CPT code is simply being denied, is not covered. How do you keep your finger on the pulse of your claim reimbursement at a procedure code level? So today we're actually going to talk about the tools to take a deeper x-ray or look into low collections versus CPT codes. And whether or not you're simply looking at your dashboard and you see that $27,000 at this point in the month is not okay, or you head over to your some of your reports and you want to look at your month close report and look at the history or the trends of how much you're getting paid. And keep in mind that I'm very zoomed in here for the sake of the presentation. If this doesn't look how it looks in your screen, that's totally, it should be expected is what I'm saying. You can click on your history tab here and then get a history of what you've been paid and what's been adjusted or refunded. But if you do recognize a problem, where do you go? The first place we're going to tell you to go is head over to Reports, Billing Analytics, and over here, I'm going to leave this entire drop-down open, is a number of ways of slicing and dicing the financials for your practice. Here, we're going to focus on the Billing Statistics report, but first I'm going to open your Billing Statistics configuration screen. Here is a list of data points that you as a practice owner or practice manager can take a look at, but I'd really like you to understand what each one means. You can create, customize, or personalize even reports. Well, today we're going to be looking at CPT codes, and we're going to be looking at primary insurance, and you might even want to be looking at rendering physicians. And so you can create a report named CPT code, rendering, and your payer. You can save this report and it'll be added to your list of selections when you actually go to open up your billing statistics report. But the question is what data am I going to look at and why? So today we're actually going to take a dive into what data you actually want to look at. So out of all of these, we just created your CPT rendering and payer report. But since this is our demonstration screen, the data that you're going to see is not terribly useful. So we're going to toggle out of this, and we're actually going to take you through some numbers that we've already run for a couple of practices. To take you through why you run this, we'll do that in just a minute. But beforehand, we want to give you a nuts and bolts look at what these types of reports will actually offer you. You can see here, we've got a date range here at the bottom. I have chosen the last year. And then out of that drop-down, I chose to look at CPT codes only. Let's take this off of Zoom for just a moment here. And if you move over to the right a little bit more, here you're able to run that by physician. And then here you can click insurance only or personal injury protection claims only. And keep in mind, Jess, when they run personal injury protection claims only, that really just means that they're running any account that have claims created while the IS-PIT flag is checked on the account.
Correct.
That's right. Just double checking so I don't give inaccurate information. So in this particular case, and I'm going to zoom back in one more for the presentation, you'll see here that we have the CPT code in the description because that's the only data point that we chose. Why would you want to look at what your CPT code billing looked like over the last year? Well, for a number of reasons. Number one, looking at the volumes, right? There were 494 patient accounts in this practice that billed out your 97110. I don't know if that's the biggest one, so we can sort or filter based on this. So zooming in just once more, that 97140 was the number one CPT code billed out as far as the number of accounts that actually had that. And it was billed out on 7,860 visits for a total of 7,868 claims. It's pretty useful information because not only do you get that, you know how many units you billed out, and you know how many dollars you billed out. When it comes to knowing the real important information, though, you have to scroll over to the right. Now, keep in mind, if you're looking at this on your regular screen, you typically don't have to zoom in as much as you would have to for a presentation like this over a webinar. So typically scrolling is not necessary. But Jess, I know you run into people who want to run 5 or 6 data points on this, and at some point we run out of real estate, right?
Right.
So here you see that over $500,000 has been billed out for this particular CPT code. What other relevant information do we find here? First of all, we're going to break this out by paid by insurance and paid by the patient. So far, there's been a total of $215,000 paid, 212 of which, I mean, the lion's share was paid by insurance companies. And this $2,684.10 is the amount recorded as would those just be copays and co-insurance?
Right. Anything that's either allocated from the patient account or paid directly on the claim. Some people do that with statements. They put those patient payments directly on a claim. And I just want to point out that these 2 columns are new. So if you're on billing stats and are not seeing these 2 columns, it may just be on our beta server right now because I did not see these before I went on vacation. So
yeah, no, they're actually they're rolled out now. They're rolled out. The only one I didn't check was our App One server, but I would imagine it's there. So everybody should be seeing the same view. It's a little bit of a tangent, but that segue would lead us into saying, you'll notice you never see a notification from us saying, you're going to experience some downtime over the weekend while we're updating our servers. It's not how we do it. When we have a new feature, we roll it out in real time. So we'll try it out on one server. If there are no bugs and it's stable, we keep promoting that to all of the servers. But you'll never see a notification about downtime for us. So pretty much any time you ever want to log in and you go to the website to log in, it'll direct you to the servers that are up. So, but why is this useful? Right now, understanding that you got paid so much and out of so much that was billed, understanding that you have a whole big balance still left over of $137,000 for this CPT code over the last year. This next number, I'm going to move from right to left at this point, is 45. Just what does that 45 days say under average AR? What does that mean? Do you remember?
I believe it means the average number of days that it took for the claims to get paid.
Yeah. Some of the claims obviously got paid within a couple of days. Some of them got paid maybe not so quickly. But on average, this particular set of claims is getting paid within 45 days. Now, remember, I ran this over a year. So there are maybe some claims that are personal injury claims, some claims that were that the patient never paid. So we can look into that in just a moment and figure out why the claims aren't paid. But here, you can see here that 38.77% of the claims have been paid, 21% of the claims were clean. And our definition of clean doesn't mean that they're okay to touch. It means that nobody ever touched them. For us, we like to make sure that there's many claims that go out the door and get paid as possible without you, the users, having to actually correct the claim, fix the claim, post the claim. This means end-to-end. It was submitted electronically and paid electronically. So the higher that number is, the better. But the average billed, for this particular visit, associated with the claim is $70.67, and the amount paid per visit so far is $27.40. So those are really useful numbers when it comes to figuring out how this particular CPT code is performing. Now, I do find that some of these numbers can be really useful, but they have to be looked at in other contexts as well. So this is just looking at a CPT code. If we move over to another rendition of the report over the same exact time frame, you're looking at primary insurance only. Now, primary insurance only by itself will only tell you so much. You can sort by balances, how much has been paid, how much hasn't been paid. I'm sorry, I'll scroll back over here. I'll flip it over just one more time. So you can see $237,000 here in the top slot belongs to the payer of Blue Cross Blue Shield. But if we take this a step further and we actually combine your CPT code and your primary, you can actually say, all right, most of my claims are BCBS claims, so we can filter down to your Blue Cross Blue Shield. In this particular case, it's in New Jersey. And let me see, out of all of my claims, I've got 3 CPT codes that are not paid a majority of the time, $60,000, $60,000, and nearly $50,000. And I can come back and actually see it's my therapeutic exercises. Basically, my rehab codes are the top 2, your 97140 and your 97110. So this would lead you to question, all right, why are these my biggest balances? What is it on this set of claims that are or are not getting paid? Is it all from the same clinician? Is it from a service facility or location? If you have more than one location, this allows you to start honing in on what your CPT codes are or are not doing for you. Also, imagine we have, I'll just tell an anecdote from a practice in Delaware just the other day. They knew that they weren't getting paid certain CPT codes from Medicaid patients. They decided that they're going to stop seeing Medicaid patients on certain days of the week because they just weren't making enough money. They had to make sure that they scheduled other patients. If you see that's the case, you can make decisions about your practice that can be useful. So looking at this, you can see that, and I'll just filter down so I can look at one line and make it crystal clear for us. Your 97140 billed out over 2,700 visits over the last 12 months and created almost just as many claims. You can see that almost $200,000 was billed out and $102,000 of that was paid by insurance. Come over here, and on that $60,000 balance, any number that's in a color is what do you call it? Clickable, Jess, or drillable?
Drillable is
Drillable is the word that we use, meaning that you can click on it and you can even take a step further. More importantly, you can actually do some math. And this is where I'm going to show you the next couple of features here. When it comes to what you're getting paid per CPT code, there is some real value in making sure that you know what your average reimbursement looks like. Because if you're not billing the right code, or you could be building a code that could be more lucrative, here's where you're going to, well, the rubber will meet the road for you, frankly. So I'm going to stop.
Sorry.
No problem. I'm going to look at all of my Blue Cross Blue Shield claims. It's sometimes challenging to look at all of them in this interface. And sometimes I want to do some manipulation of the numbers to make sure I understand them. On the bottom left-hand corner, there are a few icons here. You've got the print icon. I believe this is just called the Excel icon, where it's a spreadsheet icon. And then I actually don't know what this one is, Jess.
Refresh.
The refresh one. Well, we don't need that. But I am going to click on this Excel icon, and it brings up all of the values in a CSV format. I just so happen to have an untitled spreadsheet up already, and I can bring this data in, and it allows me to look at it in a spreadsheet format. Now I'm able to take the data and make a little more sense out of it should I need to. And I'll give you a real quick for example on this. If I've billed out a total of $195,000 and I've been paid $103,000, I can manipulate this spreadsheet to help me understand my practice even more clearly. Because I don't want to be in a situation where I know I've billed out a lot of money and I don't know what I'm getting paid, per charge. So I'm going to insert a column here. Oh, I meant to insert it right here. And I can actually see if I billed out this much and I was paid this much, so your total billed divided by your total paid, and we'll just bring this decimal point back down to a reasonable number. How's that looking so far? It means I'm making $1.89 for this CPT code on average. Yeah, I've been paid $102,000 and $616 for this particular CPT code over a year, but my percentage is not working. So if I want to know what I'm getting paid per unit, let's just say, I'll take my total units and I'll divide that by my total paid. You get that right, Jess? I do that backwards.
I think you did it backwards. How many units divided by how much you got paid?
Paid per unit sounds better, doesn't it?
A little bit.
That's all right. So now I'm getting paid $37 per unit. If I'm in network, I can very easily look at this and say, all right, that's either above or below. I also have to take into consideration that I have a pretty big balance. Why aren't these things getting paid? If I have this huge balance and I know that there's a whole bunch of claims that just aren't getting paid, I can either question my internal biller or I can come to our teams and say, I would like to know why there's a $60,000 balance for my 97140s. Getting down to the micro level of what's happening with your CPT codes is important to maintain that control that is you as a practice owner or a practice manager need. When somebody comes to me and says they have low collections and I don't see a smoking gun, this is the level that we get down to actually make sure we know that they're performing. When it comes to this type of control, we've actually had webinars in the past where we've talked about automation that you can put in place to actually help you track per CPT code. reimbursement. So we can reference you back there, but this is one of those tools, the billing statistics tool, that helps you stay on top of how you're performing. Now, that's one flip side, billing performance. The other is we have lots of practices who have goals or targets as far as what they should be billing out for patients who have certain diagnosis codes. So if you know you offer rehab services and you're trying to actually check, clinicians, there's one other combination, and we'll show you this one in real time here, of CPT codes and diagnosis codes that you can look at to make sure that your practice is actually billing out the right codes in the right volumes. So in our demonstration account here, you can see we have quite a few different combinations. This is probably not what yours looks like. We'll pick it up here. It's probably under diagnosis. All right, we got our diagnosis and CPT code here. And I'm just going to make it a little smaller so I can actually see my search function. And you can see here it's working. And this is actually real time. It's bringing up a year's worth of data. So if this takes just a moment, that actually should be expected. It's actually going back to the database and scrubbing all claims and pulling out the diagnosis codes as well as the CPT codes. And now it's not based on payer because we didn't choose that particular combination this time. But if you know you should be billing out rehab codes with certain diagnosis codes, then you want to make sure you can actually track that. So as a practice owner, you know that every patient not only is getting treated correctly, but you're also billing for the services you know that you're performing. It's probably one of the more popular ones I get asked about. How do I know that my staff is actually billing out what they should be billing out for the visits? Only other real way of finding this out is manually. And so we typically see that if you have multiple service locations or if you have multiple rendering physicians, you're going to want to be able to pull this data with diagnosis code, CPT code, service facility, and rendering physician all at once. And you can create those reports so that you can look at all of that data at one time. So it's one of the nicest things that people have said is that, for those larger practices, I'm really able to keep my finger on the pulse of how my offices are performing. So if you were to do that, you would go back over to your billing statistics configuration, click it here, and you could then, choose your CPT code, choose your diagnosis code, not provider, but rendering physician, primary insurance even, and your service facility. And you can create that report. It'll allow you to look at all of those things at once, filter down on doctors, locations, payers, insurance companies, and those are some of the things that are going to really help you keep the finger on the pulse of your practice. No, it was the last one, wasn't it, Jess?
Yep.
Perfect. So here our report, I don't want to say finally, but it took almost a minute and a half, 2 minutes to actually render. And now we're able to see, based on diagnosis code, I can actually look at my rehab codes, 97140, and see which diagnosis codes are being billed more than another. And this is one of those few times where you actually want to look at the lower numbers. So for these diagnosis codes, we're not billing these. And remember, Jess, you can confirm this for me. When we choose diagnosis 1, it's only in the first spot that we're talking about, right?
Right. It's looking at the reference diagnosis 1 on the claim. Perfect.
So you can come down and say, all right, for these diagnosis codes, we're actually not billing out, or we are billing out. And you can see the ratio of which ones you're billing out. So keep that in mind as you're actually running your practice. You want to be able to say, all right, we either are or we're not billing out the accurate amount of rehab codes. And I'm simply using that as one of the examples. So if you do have any questions, though, while we're talking here, you can chat those questions in, and we'd be happy to answer them about how you want to look or track your own CPT codes, diagnosis codes, or anything else having to do with our billing statistics report. But this was one of the ones that was requested. How do I keep track of CPT codes? And it was a number of people who asked. And this is one of those ways where you can actually do it. Anything to add, Jess?
The only thing I can think of is to remember that our billing stats report is updated overnight.
Okay.
So this is accurate as of last night.
Yeah. So in other words, you can't run today's statistics.
Right. But if you're looking for a history type thing, one day really shouldn't matter.
Yeah, most of these reports are trending. Okay, the last thing I really wanted to show regarding this was not only can you see this historically, but if you only want to look at the outstanding, you can click on your dashboard and it brings up your accounts receivable report, your AR report, and it will give you the same exact choices as far as the way to slice and dice data. So here you're looking at your outstanding balances based on CPT code and diagnosis. Or here it's the same exact practice that we're looking at with the outstanding CPT codes where you're actually looking at the payers as well. And so you can see which ones have balances over 120 days, which ones have balances that are within 0 to 30 days, so you can tell where your problem accounts lie. For this particular practice, when you're looking at the ones that are over 120 days old with Geico, there's a certain expectation that those balances are going to be there because you might be in litigation. But if you're looking at Blue Cross Blue Shield, the expectation is that you're really not going to have a whole bunch of accounts that are actually outstanding over 120 days. So we'll take one moment here to look at your Blue Cross Blue Shield. And keep in mind, this is the same practice with that $107,000 of outstanding balance. You can see that $0 are past the 90-day mark. All of the dollars, and a bulk of them, a lion's share, are in the 0 to 30 days for your $91,000 balance, your $14,000 balance, excuse me, in the 30 to 60 day, then a much smaller balance in your 60 to 90 day. And this allows you to not only look at what's happening per CPT code, but also understand the billing performance, because if you saw a whole bunch of these for Blue Cross Blue Shield where you expect the payments to be much, much faster, I would imagine alarmed would be the word I would use to describe you, because I would be alarmed if that was my practice. So that's the last tool that we're going to show today on how to look at your CPT codes and see which ones are or are not performing for you. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to chat them in. We're going to hang out here for a few minutes, and we'll be answering any of those questions that you might have. We're doing an install out in Washington State, and I'm almost tempted to drop the name because he's one of the ones who puts on one of the bigger conferences. And again, CPT code performance is probably his #1 metric. Very different than a lot of other practices, but since he has clinic directors at each one of his 5 locations, they're constantly trying to figure out, did we bill everything that we were supposed to? And I won't say the software package they're on right now doesn't allow them to look back historically and see whether or not they've corrected mistakes, whether or not they can go back and send corrected claims, et cetera. So this is one of the things that they were most excited about. And I know this past weekend at a seminar, he got up and said, you have to look at this. So I got sent a link for the video. So it's cool. All right, if there are no questions, we'll stay here just another minute and then we'll sign off. But you can pretty much ask a question about anything.
Yeah, anything in the system anyway.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you, everybody, and have a great week.